everybody. My name is Robin McNair. I'm the coordinator of Visual and Performing Arts for Santa Ana Unified School District. And with me today, I have Miss Sabrina Skills. Hi, Sabrina. She's our Visual and Performing Arts curriculum specialist for the district. And our special guest, Rigo Maldonado, who's an amazing artist and teacher, ceramics teacher in our district. So today we're going to take some time to get to know Rigo about his work and what he's doing with our kids and the community. So Rigo, tell us about yourself and your background.
Well, I
Sure.
guess I'm going to go through kind of a little bit of a visual history of like who I am as a person, how I got into the arts, and if you have any questions, please interrupt me and just let me know. But basically, I was born and raised in Santa Ana, and can all of you see my screen? Is it viewable now?
Yep.
Okay, cool. And I really like showing this. I show this picture to my students all the time because this was me in Halloween. I wish it wasn't Halloween. I wish it was just a regular day, right? But no, it was Halloween. And my mom did my makeup that day. And I realized that I could do a better job in makeup than her. And I realized that was the first time I was creative, right? And so I don't know, like my Frida Kahlo eyebrows, vampire look was just not really working for me. Maybe it was a conceptual thing, but I just was not feeling it. And so I realized at that point that I was creative because I'm like, I went back the next day and I practiced the makeup and it looked really cool. And I wish I would have documented it, but it was a major difference on what I was trying to go for. And so that was the first time I would say I started my journey to being creative, right? Um, but it wasn't always so easy. Even though I took the art classes, I started taking art classes in high school, and this is my actual report card from when I was a senior in high school. And as you can see, I had a lot of absences and works below ability, and I have to give credit to that teacher because I think that I did work below my ability. I just did the basic minimum. I wasn't challenged. I did not feel connected to the material I was being taught. It was a whole different world. I grew up in a family that art did not belong to us. Art was something that was only for a different class, social class. It was at a museum or gallery, but it was not part of my daily language, right? And so though I took as a senior, I had over credits, I was able to take 3 art classes. I did not feel connected to the material nor to my instructors, right? And I was never pushed in order to succeed. So you see the C minuses, A minuses, and A for art classes. And yeah, I just wish I was a little bit more into it, right?
It's nice of you to share this story because I think there are many people who can relate to what you're talking about.
Right,
And I'm
absolutely.
curious to see how this informed you in your journey toward becoming an educator.
Right. And so I was just like what a lot of my students, and I think that's a connection. When I became an educator, is I really wanted to reach out to those kids who have the potential and those kids who, uh, they might not be on the top of their rank or they're not at the bottom. Those are usually the two ones that we focus on, the lower rank and the high rank. But we never have those kids are in between. And I was like one of those in between kids where I didn't realize I had the potential to go to school. So um, I was given the option to either go to community college or it was never really enforced education. Like, yeah, my parents understood that it's important, but it's like, how are you going to bring money home, right? So I ended up going to Santa Ana College, and there I met an artist named Irene Cervantes, who's well known for her paintings of the mural of Dolores Huerta, which you see on the left-hand side. And it was there that I started connecting to artwork. She brought in a lot of Mesoamerican art, and I started taking a Mesoamerican art history class. And I was like, wow, I can see myself in these paintings and these sculptures. And though I'm not like uh, connected a lot to like indigenous philosophies or even looks, I still had that connection and I felt very empowered. And through that empowerment, through the arts, I started really connecting to my other classes and seeing the connections. I'm like, wait, I have something in me that I can do better with, you know? And so I ended up transferring to UCLA. I organized a lot at Santa Ana College, a lot of high school conferences through Mecha. And, but I also integrated a lot of the arts into my practices. Even though I had no idea what the arts meant, I just understood it as a way to have fun and be creative, right? Um, in retrospect, I wish I would have taken a glass blowing class that they used to offer at Santa Ana College, but they don't offer it there anymore. But I did take my first ceramics class there, and I had never taken an. Well, I did take one in high school, but uh, it was really cool to be able to tap into that creative process.
It's never too late to take an art class. Maybe
Never.
you'll find a glass blowing somewhere else.
I know, I
Just
was going to
saying.
say that's my dream too. I was only
Me
trying
too.
ceramics for
Actually,
a
I want to
while.
work with metals and welding.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
one of my next big dreams. So, yeah, keep telling us your story.
So after I went to, well, the transfer process to UCLA was not great. I got denied the first time, and I wrote a letter of appeal, and that's where I got in after being denied. And I wanted to prove not only to myself, but to others as well, that I had the skill set and I had the brains to do this. So I ended up graduating with honors, summa cum laude, from UCLA after 2 years of transferring in there. And I learned so much where I met Judy Baca, Professor Judy Baca, who curates, and she created the world's largest mural. It's called the Great Wall of Los Angeles. And she taught me the most important thing about art is that art has a story, and art belongs to everybody. It's not just for certain classes, right? And so from there, I started working with her, and I did mural tours, and I worked at the Social and Public Art Resource Center, where I started learning more about how important art is in communities, especially in disenfranchised communities. Both of those mentors, I would say, encouraged my non-traditional arts, and this for me was altar making. I started making my first altar at Coos Cafe in Santa Ana when back in the early 90s. And it was a collaboration with another artist, Susan Levano. Actually, she's a librarian at Santa Ana College at the time. She's now at Cal State Long Beach. And we put together this amazing community event where we started showcasing artwork. And it was not really popular at the time doing altars, right? But she believed in me so much, also, Susan Levano, that she gave me space at the library at Santa Ana College, and I did this women's altar right here, and just like started taking over non-traditional spaces with altar making, right? And that's not a form of art that was kind of like looked at as an artwork, right? It was more like, oh, well, it's something that you do at home, right? But I started taking my altars to another level where I started making them more a collaboration, and where people were able to kind of communicate their loss and their sense of um, honoring of somebody through the altar. So like this one was on a shopping cart, and people by the end of the exhibit, it was all little tags of people putting dedications to forgotten people. And it's really nice, really cool.
And what a gift that you give to people to help us redefine traditional so that we can expand the opportunity for people to honor their dead.
Right, absolutely. This was actually a campaign I did with my students. Before I became a teacher, I worked for a nonprofit organization called Orange County Human Relations. And there I was able to kind of integrate, do school-wide projects by integrating arts as a tool for the students to talk about what was going on. And at the time, we were dealing with a lot of school deaths and violence at school. So each one of these shirts represents one student who died in school violence throughout the nation. That's actually in locker for my high school. I don't know how I ended up inheriting it, but I created this alternative way of looking at the altars as a way to honor and as a way to remember. I also started using a lot of videos before the flat screen TVs, there was a big giant video TV in the background with a VCR at the bottom. And this was a video I did of my uncle where it would just be different fragments of his life, and it would be kind of rotating in this video. And so it was a reflection. It was based, there's a mirror right there. So it was a reflection of my uncle as well as you're looking at yourself. So I was also invited to do altar making at Dartmouth College. I worked with students to create a community altar where we individualized the little boxes for each student to honor somebody that they loved. And so this was a good way for me to bring communities together. It was also a good way for me to talk about loss, but also not important. The most important thing is to celebrate a life, right? And so this was a perfect medium for me to be able to do that. So again, I started doing a lot of these altar making. I started doing it. I also did it in China. And I also started exploring the whole form of like altar making, like let's take it to a different level, right? And I was invited to be part of a fashion show, and I would incorporate things that you would put on an altar into fashion. The first one, the one to the left is dedicated to my friend, Gia. And the one to the right is dedicated to Divine, where she has like a mini altar as a headpiece as well. And all these are marigolds, hand sewn to a tablecloth. So it's kind of like this whole altar aspect. This one's to the left is Maria Callas, where I built that bird cage. And then to the right is Basquiat. And then this one was fun. This one was, Kellogg's came up with the campaign to create this cereal honoring Cesar Chavez and Celia Cruz. And to us, there's really no connection between them. One was an organizer, one was an entertainer. And it was weird, but they were trying to lump people of color together for this National Hispanic Month. And so they created this cereal box. I thought it was like the worst, kitschiest thing. So I kind of wanted to create a dress based on that, a paper dress. So this was a tribute to Chavez, Cruz, and Warhol.
What was that like going from the altar making all over to fashion? Like, how did that translate for you?
I just thought it was a moving altar. To me, it was just like sort of like something that, like, what would it look like if you started, if the altar started walking? Well, this is what it would look like. It would look like fashion, right?
And I love that you were considering these questions that were driving your inquiries that led you to these really unique and remarkable spaces.
Yeah. And so, like we celebrate death every single day. Like a lot of us who wear t-shirts of like icons, whether it be Tupac or Andy Warhol or whatever, we are like walking with this dead person in our t-shirt, right? So we are celebrating their lives every day when we wear these t-shirts. So it's sort of the same concept where you get this altar and like, how do you break it down to the minimal to address the celebration of the life of this person?
And Rigo, didn't this work lead to you doing a lot of stuff in Santa Ana?
Yeah. Again, the first altar I did was based in Santa Ana. It was all at Coos Cafe, then at the local colleges and libraries. And then I started the first Day of the Dead event. I think I have images of there in here, but I was one of the first organizers for the Day of the Dead event. And do I have pictures of that? I'm not sure if I do, but I'll go back to that, I think. But yeah, it was one of the most celebrated events now in Santa Ana.
Yeah, that gets tens of thousands of people participate in that every year.
Absolutely. And it started off with this at the little cafe right here at Coos Cafe. Then we went to a community center, and then we went to the Mexican Cultural Center. And then from there, it just blew up. So let me move forward to from the fashion to like my community organizing aspects. I started creating artwork to, how would I say, to address social issues, right? So at this time, there was a lot of women who were being murdered in Ciudad Juarez in Mexico. And so I took a trip there, and we just heard the women's stories and the mother stories, and we wanted to bring attention to this plight that was happening of all these missing women who were being murdered. So we created an art show, and it was called Hijas de Juarez. I created this outdoor installation with 320 crosses, and also this other installation, which is another altar, but each of the cups has something different, where we went to the desert and we started looking for these women's bodies. It was a really surreal thing. I organized this with my co-organizer. Her name is Victoria Delgadillo, and we started working on this aspect of bringing awareness to what was happening with these femicides, as they're known now. This is other stuff of my personal work. To the left is a ceramic piece. It's like 3 feet tall. And then these are our bronze castings I used to do. I didn't take any art classes beyond the high school class and the ceramics class at junior college until I got my credentials. So even though I was mostly self-taught, but I didn't have the art vocabulary. I didn't really I just kind of self-taught myself. You know, it wasn't until I wanted to become an art teacher that I had to take art classes. So this is where I created that stuff. Here's some
And
more stuff.
it's nice that you point that out to show that there are many roads that an artist can take, right? And certainly many of our kids and many of the people that we know are self-taught, and yet you learned that you needed to learn some more so you can continue to grow as an artist.
Right. And then of course it's like when I was doing the altars, I never saw it as a form of art, but it was more of an expression. I just thought like, oh, well, this is something our family does. But that's because just because it's not valued in the mainstream art world doesn't mean it's an aesthetic that should not go unnoticed, right? It's just as beautiful as any installation you would see.
Exactly.
Right.
And installations as an art form is a whole unique thing in and unto itself.
Right.
That's truly emerging, and a lot more immersive installations and things that you've been doing. So I look forward to seeing some of those pieces as we get into this more.
Yeah. So we have some of my personal artwork. I like getting old vintage dolls from the 40s and 50s, creating molds out of them, and then repurposing them to like daily candle holders of Ross's, whatever. And at this point, when I was creating this work, I started working at a gallery, but that's not where I was going to go. This is a piece that I did with South Help Graphics, and this is part of the permanent collection at the LA County Museum of Art. And this has traveled around the world. So a lot of it is basically telling a different type of story. So I'm kind of like a master of none, right? But I really like exploring with different mediums, whether it be sculpture, whether it be printmaking, whether it be photography. And when at one point after being laid off from the Orange County Human Relations, I was like, what am I going to do now? So I'm like, let me explore this whole concept of gallery life. You know, I already know that art is very powerful, but let me go into the commercial side of it. And I learned so much, right? These are my photos I took, and we put them on Cadillac hoods. This is a half of a Cadillac hood. These are all sculptures made out of cars. And this is in Palm Springs. I started this collection of diningware because I wanted to see like, how can I take this artwork and be a little bit more A, profitable, and B, how do I make it be used on a daily? It doesn't, where it's not so special that it has to be behind a case or a gallery wall, but like these are all, you can either put them on the wall or you can eat off of them, right? So I started looking at vintage x-rays as a form of creating dinnerware. This is more of the mid-century modern dinnerware. So this is all self-taught. I didn't take any classes on how to create these dishes and create these artworks. So that's more of my photographs onto silkscreen onto the dinnerware.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you about the process that you use to create most of those, the methods. Because I'm curious myself.
And it's so non-traditional, right? Because we tend to box things, drawing and painting in certain ways, but you're expanding our thinking about
Yeah,
all
where
the
where does
possibilities.
art belong, right?
Yeah.
We always think like, oh, art has to be in a gallery or at a museum, but in my kind of thinking, it's like art can be anywhere. Like I just did a post the other day about my favorite museum and gallery. It's not necessarily a traditional one, but I like going to the flea market, and I love seeing the people. I love seeing the old artwork that you see on the floor and whatever. That's my favorite gallery. That's my favorite museum. Is like going to these monthly vintage flea markets and seeing, you know, artwork that might not be considered cool artwork in a museum, but it's cool to me.
Well, and in kind of a similar vein, being in the digital age, my favorite gallery is just actually going through different social media accounts, just kind of like spawning off of other people's just to find that loophole where you find new pieces and new techniques.
Right, absolutely. It's awesome. Right. And I think that's what like it's what's cool about being an artist is that you're always kind of researching, you're always kind of like, what's the next thing? You know, what do you know, where can you take your artwork? These are the photos that I used to sell at the gallery. These are all different vintage signage, neon signs I would take up. And even though I love doing the work, it was also very commercial, and it's very like anybody can own it kind of thing because it was that cheap. One of my photos was featured. Well, it wasn't featured, but it was part of a decor like spread and out decor. But hey, my photo, it's my artwork that's in that wall, that lady's house, but whatever. I still take credit for it. um, so that's a little bit more of my artwork. Let's go into more of my philosophy and teaching. And this is something that was not done overnight. And I think it starts with like my mentors of Irena Cervantes, Susan Levano, Judy Baca, mostly all women who are very nurturing to me in terms of like supporting the arts and helping me like kind of navigate that, and where I wasn't afraid to take risk. And so when I worked at the Orange County Human Relations, again, I really wanted to hear the stories of our students because what we did is we worked with race relations, anti-bullying and homophobia. And so like, how do you get people to talk about these things without just talking about it, but maybe using art as a tool? And I'll get a little bit more into that and how I did that. But I just recently, in the last couple of years, I've been thinking about like the most important thing of an art, as my teaching philosophy is based on three things: your head, your heart, and your hands. And so when you connect these three things together, what kind of magic happens, right? How do we connect these three things to let our students or ourselves be part of that process of telling a story, right?
And I just want to say, sometimes that's easier said than done to connect all of
Absolutely. For
those.
me, I can easily tell my students like, let's do this. But for me to get to that point, it takes a big process, right? It's not just like, okay, I'm going to connect all three together. You know, it's a lot of internal investigations.
And that's the beauty about the art being vulnerable, being willing to investigate and explore, examine, and be authentic. And that I think really comes out in your work.
Yeah. Well, my work is a little bit different, I would say, from like my students' work, but like I think you have to create a culture in your classroom. And so like my classroom is not a classroom, my classroom is a studio, right? And I really want to engage my students to be part of a community that they are loved and they are respected and that they have a voice, right? And so you know, sometimes they're not even called students. They're like, hey, you're an artist. What do you want to say about this, right? And so I really encourage that in my classroom. Like, this is a normal classroom to me where they're all kind of helping each other out. And like, I really support when they like a creative environment, but also one that they're loved in. And one that they're helping each other in. You know, I never tell them like, go help this person out, you know, as a form of punishment, but like they do this together as a little community. But I have to get to the point where I'm helping build that community as well. So I'm just kind of like the magician in the classroom, where I'm just like, boom, let's like make this happen, right? But it's more of the I'm basically an art director. I'm not necessarily a teacher. I'm just directing the students like, oh, let's try this, let's try that. And it's okay to fail in my classroom. But when we do these community type of engagements and community buildings, it creates a little community within their own clusters, right? Every year I do a hot chocolate party, and they had, in order to be part of this hot chocolate party, is they have to make their own mugs. So it's like a really good thing because they get to kind of explore what it's like to create a piece of artwork. And maybe it's just a functional piece, but it's also something that they should be proud of. And they drink out of it, and then we make a test like, well, there's no leaks in it, you pass the test, basically.
And they have their own aesthetic that they put into
Absolutely.
it. So there's beauty
Absolutely.
in functional art, which you're right, it's all around us.
Yeah.
What are they doing on the far left?
We are building towers, and this is usually what I do the first weeks is I spend a lot of time building community within my classroom, because I tell them like, these are the students, these 6 people you are sharing a table with, you're going to be spending the rest of your year with. So you got to get to know them, because they're going to help you out, and they're also going to back you up whenever you need help in terms of like, if you can't figure something out. So what we do is I do this card game where I give them index cards, and they have to build the tallest structures without falling apart.
Now,
Without
do you
breaking.
set up these small communities yourself, or do you let the students kind of decide that community and then you build the relationship?
Well, I wish I could have them set up themselves, but I have to be more strategic. I do it by alpha, last
Yeah.
name, just so when I'm taking roll call, it's easier for me to just kind of scan it through.
You know
So
what's funny? I used to do the same thing where I was a little bit more systematic, and the community still builds in that environment because they're all kind of learning and exploring together. So they all end up kind of supporting each other, you know? It's
absolutely
really amazing to see how that cultivates, I guess, in an art classroom.
right. And prior to doing this, I never used to do this, but prior to doing this, I noticed that some of my students sat together for the whole year and did not even talk to one another. They didn't even know their names, right? So now I spend the first 2 weeks of my of school is getting to interview each other, getting to know each other, and building that community within the classroom. I also do a lot of community partnerships. This is where my students who are in my second year students go into the local intermediate school, and they teach a lesson. And so I don't direct them on what they're going to teach, but I just basically tell them like, what do you want to teach that's valuable for a student? And so they chose pinch pots on this one. They're going to make little pots. And so we went to the local high school. We had, I think, 6 of us that went, 6 students, and I let them run the whole show. I didn't intervene at all. I was just like, okay, this is your show. And then they
Wait,
came.
do you mean you went to the middle school?
Yeah.
Yeah, you said high school, but you
Oh,
guys were collaborating with the middle
the
school
middle
kids.
school. Yeah. The intermediate. Yeah. So it's a really cool thing. So it gives them a sense of like purpose. At the same time, it's, this is another trick to get more art educators, because we need more art educators, especially people of color. We need more art educators. And so I'm like, oh, this is a good way, like have them teach, right? So they can, we can get them so they can go to.
Absolutely, that's a beautiful strategy.
Well, and students always learn the best, I think, from each other too, because it's more
Absolutely.
relatable.
And you
Absolutely.
learn best when you're teaching.
But you know what's so funny, one of my students came back, she's like, I never want to have kids.
Oh no.
So they're like, we don't know how middle school teachers do it. I'm like, well, I did more than one thing than just teach art, right? So let me show you a little bit about the student artwork that they do. It started off when I was, I did my teaching credential. I started really exploring the whole idea of like what it means to give voice to the underrepresented students. And so these are girls I worked with in jail. And we did this whole project on a photo project where we did these giant posters, and they told us our stories about how people turn their back on them, but they never really get to tell their stories. So this was a good way for them to tell their stories as a method to create art, and also to document what would happen and the decisions that got them to where they were at. So by them saying these stories, it was a healing process, right? I didn't know it was healing until I found out years later.
That's so beautiful, Rigo. I just want to take a moment and just, wow, that's spectacular. And I don't know if the audience had time to read it, but boy, those stories are really powerful.
Yeah, like this one to the right. My name is Stacy. I'm 15 years old. I've been through a rough childhood. I grew up with my grandma, sister, brother, aunt, and my little cousins. My mom was locked up during my childhood, so I would never got to be with her. I don't really know my dad or what he looks like. He disappeared out of my life. I started drinking when I was 13 years old, and when I was 14, I tried weed. I continued to use weed, and my drug use progressed, and I started using cocaine. After cocaine, I started to use meth, and I stopped going to school and started stealing. Now I'm here at YGC. I am doing a year here. It sucks, but I need to learn from my mistakes because I don't want to come back. When I get released, I want to finish probation. I want to finish school and go to college. I want to get a job and help my grandma out and with rent and with my restitution. I'm going to have support from my grandma, and now I'm going to do good with the support from her. So this in general was such a powerful story for them. And it kind of like mark that moment in their life, you know. And you know what? A lot of our students like this where we work at, like they can either go here or there, right? But I really wish that I'm hoping that by then documenting these stories, they can either go back to reflect or they can move forward. It's like, hey, what's happening here, right? So I think this is a great way for students to say who they are. This is a kids I worked with when graffiti was kind of rampant and kids were getting arrested for writing on the wall. So I'm like, how do we get those skills of doing graffiti, but making it more into an art form? And so we did these portraits, and we stenciled them with spray cans. Those really good techniques that we use. Again, this is a campaign against violence. And so each t-shirt represents one student who had died in an act of violence at school. I'm gonna go through these really quick. This is done for Day of Silence, where he still used spray paint and stencils to create awareness to gay and lesbian students at school. A mural we did, this is at El Salvador Park. This is an exchange in South Africa. This traveled to South Africa. This is at Cesar Chavez. Sorry, the images are so blurry. But this is I Changed Myself, I Changed the World, honoring women. This is a fun one I worked with 5th grade students where we did kites to we talked about borders and how kites can kind of go over those borders. So we studied the life of Picasso, and this is so much fun. The kites didn't fly, but they were fun to look at. Ceramics. Okay, so what happened after the gallery? So I was not happy at the gallery just because it was, you know, you had to basically produce a certain amount of money and how much time you invested in the product, which became a little bit soulless to me. So at the time, I was getting my teaching credential, and I went out for a job. I didn't get a job the first time trying out for a job after college. I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll go back to the gallery world. And come October, I get a call from my one of the professors at Cal State Long Beach, and she's like, do you know how to teach ceramics? I'm like, yeah, which is a lie, because I hadn't taken ceramics class since 20 years before at Santa Ana College when I took that class. And she's like, okay, go interview here. So I got the interview, I got the job, and I started teaching ceramics through YouTube, because I learned through YouTube first on how to do ceramics. So I was not necessarily trained to teach ceramics class. Again, I had not taught ceramics in 20 years, but I loved the medium. I just dove into it, and I started researching the heck out of YouTube, and I started figuring out that there's a good way to tell these stories through a sculptural form. This is a story about one of my students who we were doing a Day of the Dead project. And at that time we were doing like the sugar skulls, really cute and everything. But she's like, I want to do a real skull and I want to do a book. And this is going to be dedicated to my father, who her father was an alcoholic. And she wanted to do a book binding so she could never open that book of that time of her life. Right. So now we're starting to get these stories of these students who like, we might look at this as a cool, like, oh, this is really cool, but it's much more personal to the student. Sort of like this piece right here, which was a basic technique that we learned in the beginning class, the first semester. These are coil pots. And this technique in general is called the teardrop. And they're just basically little balls that have a shape of a tear. And she started building it. I'm like, okay, let's see what she goes with this. And turns out that this is a memorial vase for her father and her brother. Her father was deported, and then her brother was killed a week later in a car accident. And so she wanted to create something to honor them through all these tears. So when I was like, wow, this is like amazing. Like I never understand if is it because the studio is a safe space for all to kind of like create, or is it that's something that she had inside of her? But I was just really happy that she had that space to create in. Here's some other work, some of my past students' work.
It's such a gift when you get to know the story.
Right.
So it's very special, and in and of themselves, the pieces are beautiful.
Yeah.
Even if we don't get to know the story, because we can interpret a story for ourselves with our own construct.
Yeah, yeah. This is taking kind of pop culture and bringing it into ceramics. Amy Winehouse, Ed Sheeran, Frida Kahlo. Again, I wanted to bring the concept of Day of the Dead because I thought it was so important about honoring and also celebrating. So, like I mentioned before, I was one of the co-founders of the Day of the Dead Festival in Santa Ana. And I wanted to bring that kind of spirit to unrecognized portion of Santa Ana, which is where I work at Valley High School. You know, there's nothing that really happens really significant here. So I wanted to bring the celebration called Valley de los Muertos to our high school. And we would host a variety of workshops. I would bring in silk screen, like to do lessons on silk screening. The parents were involved. The parents did workshops. It was just like this amazing thing where it was a true community celebration. And it took many, many people to organize this. We would make pan de muerto, and we would decorate this and that and learn how to make altars. And so our students, they even made all these banners, and our students would help and create the altar for an event. And I'm going to show you a little video of like what our event's like. This is bigger than our homecoming. This is like a huge event now. I'm not going to go through all of it. Let me go through So these are student dancers. We started a dance group, Danza Seca, based on because of this event. But you'll see the amount of people there who we have.
All pre-pandemic, of course.
Oh yeah.
Sadly, we haven't been able to do this lately.
We've had student groups come perform here as well. Music, dance, anywhere from elementary to high school. We would have a band also. It was so crazy. Look at this. Oh, that's not what I was going to show you next. Well, I guess it is. So that's like the power of like arts and culture and history and everything coming together, and it creates this most magical event.
It truly does, because I had the pleasure of going, and it's nice for the community to know that when we're post the pandemic and we can convene again, this is a free public event to anybody to come
Absolutely.
out.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is another event that I had my students help us with. Like they created this installation piece for an exhibit called Messenger of Dreams, and it was a district-wide art exhibit in downtown Santa Ana where we had free range of the whole gallery. And so I'm like, oh, I'm going to bring this idea of like these totem poles, a redefined totem pole. So the students created these and put them together at the exhibit. We also worked on this day bed. It was a bed, and each ribbon had everybody's dreams. So there were really powerful ways to like how the everyday people would just tell their stories in these little clouds around the bed. Here's a little bit of the gallery. So again, I had the students really be a part of organizing and also creating these pieces. It took many months of planning. We also had our local culinary classes do all the
The
appetizers.
food and yeah,
Yeah.
it was really spectacular.
I love that photo of the
And so many people were involved, and
Oh yeah.
this was the first time for some of the families to have come to a gallery ever, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, for the most part. Yeah, these kids live in Santa Ana, which is our hub, and you know, a lot of them don't go to downtown. We also had an opportunity to work with the Seegerson Center for Performing Arts. And I told them like, yeah, we'll do it if we have the kids do a backstage tour of the space, just because like maybe this would spark an interest in like, maybe I want to work I want to be backstage and I want to work as a director or whatever or conductor. So the more opportunities I can give my students, I think the better, right? So they got to see a functional, the way
Absolutely. And you're an opportunity maker, so
here's
open their
where
eyes.
they lift the stage and all the mechanics showing the students. So it's really cool. And I had them again organize a concept of we learned about Judy Chicago's dinner table, and from there we went to created this altar where each student got to create their own pieces and create a setting for Day of the Dead to honor one person. Then the pandemic hits, y'all. All right, I'm gonna go through the pandemic really quick because I know we're running out of time. At that point, we were doing narrative bases, and narrative bases where they tell their story, whatever story they want to tell, but they are telling a story through these pots, and it's been done for centuries. We were looking at the work of Roberto Lugo, and so I was teaching them at that point when the pandemic hit, where I was teaching them how to transfer designs on clay. Here we have Freddie Mercury, and I was teaching them how to transfer it onto clay. And sometimes I use media to like, I want you to visualize what your pot might look like. So sometimes they get on Snapchat and use little filters or on Canva. And this is what the kid was doing, was trying to figure out how his pot might look. So I'm trying to integrate technology with like this ancient old technique of ceramics. We were also getting ready for an art exhibit. This was going to be part of Santa Ana College high school art exhibit. So these are some of the pieces that we're going to go. So we're wrapping them up. We're getting them ready. And we're also doing a jewelry sale where the kids made ceramic pieces, because every couple of years I take students to Europe, and we basically fundraise so they can have transportation to and from the airport, but they pay for the trip themselves. This is not school related or district related, but it's something I do individually to offer this opportunity for students to go learn a different culture and experience. We got to do cooking classes in Italy. We were also in Spain, on Pisa, and it was just an amazing time. And one of my main goals as coming back to Santa Ana to teach here is that students go beyond their bubble and students go beyond their circles to dream bigger. So the pandemic hits. I'm going back to the pandemic. So we're getting ready for all that stuff. The pandemic hits. I'm like, what am I going to do? How do I teach ceramics? I went delivering clay to different students, of course, at a safe distance. We sanitized everything in the classroom like crazy, but it was so much fun getting to know the students and where they lived. And some of them live far. And I'm like, wow, you come all the way to school here. And it was really cool that they were able to create during the pandemic when it first hit last March. And one of the most touching thing is that they became the teachers to the younger siblings. So we have Nancy here, who's my student of the year last year, teaching her younger brother how to make little pinch pots and how to make little ceramic pieces as everybody was dealing with this pandemic. So it was really beautiful. I'm going to show you, actually, I'm not going to show you this because of timing.
All right, guys.
Oh, maybe I will show you this.
On Facebook, how it says the birthday's coming up, what nonprofit do you want to donate to? Well, I've decided that I want to be the nonprofit. Well, not actually me, but my students, and hoping that you can support them next year. As we know, it's kind of uncertain what's happening next year, and so we don't know if we're going to go online all the way, or half of them are going to come to school. But what I thought was like, why don't I try to get individual tools for each of them so they can take home and work at home if they can. So a lot of you have seen like all the stuff I've been doing, like going in and out of their house, not in and out of the house, but dropping off their projects, picking them up and doing all that stuff. It seemed to work out, but a lot of the times they didn't have their own proper tools to work with. So I'm like, I went on Amazon and I found this cool bag with all these tools for like $10, and it comes with all these little carving tools, you see, scratch tools, needle tools, wood tools, ribs, sponges, and a wire cutter.
So during this pandemic, I learned how to be social media savvy. I had to learn how to like reach out to my friends. With my friend support, I was able to get a toolkit for every single student in my class. That's 100 over close to 200 toolkits I was able to get. And it was all through just doing the social media post. And Phil, this is the way I'm teaching now. This is me on camera, and I'm going to show you a little bit.
So what's going to happen, you guys, I'm going to go through all the stages of clay once more. When the first stage of clay is,
I'm not going to make you go through all of this. But...
And this stripe. So let's see what happens when I do this.
Oh, wait, what happened in my video? Anyways, that's the way I'm teaching right now. It's working out somehow or another. I mean, I really miss my students. I miss that concept of community. Okay. But that's how I'm teaching. Weird.
it's nice to see how you're making it work, because artists are very resilient, and we still I rise, and we're excited to hear about what that is.
Okay.
And truly, yeah, making it happen. So tell us about this story.
So what I want to leave you with is this last piece where I ended up with over 180 narrative pots. Remember, we were looking at those narrative pots, and I'm like, what am I going to do with all these? I gave the options for the students to come pick them up, but a lot of them, we're still trying to figure out how to maintain safety without being exposed to the virus. So I had this opportunity to create a piece. I was supposed to show my own personal artwork, but I'm like, this is a good way for me to show my students' artwork. So I'm going to show you this video. So this exhibit is an installation I created for Self-Help Graphics for their annual Day of the Dead show, and it's titled Still I Rise. And I want to say it's more of a collaboration piece between myself and my students. My process as an artist is that of collaboration, community, and coming together and trying to create some type of magic at the end of it. I think that the importance of having Day of the Dead altar is like, this is something that goes beyond a skull. This goes beyond something that you buy at Target or at Party City or at Walmart. It's about honoring, it's about telling these stories of all these people that we have here in the altar. Their stories stopped, but we will continue these stories and we will continue to honor them, whether it be through the arts or whether it be through our mouths or whether it be through our writings. It would be a way for them to continue these stories to honor their legacies. In this case, we chose the narrative vase as a vehicle for them to work on and to create an installation with what was left behind from when the pandemic first hit. So in March 2020, our students were working on their narrative vases. And in this unit, narrative vases are used as a way to tell their story. And narrative vases and pottery have been used throughout many centuries to record this story, to record their words. And so as the pandemic hit, we had to kind of evacuate the school and we had to pack everything up. We didn't know we were coming back in 2 days. We weren't sure we were going to come back in 2 weeks or a month. But at the end of the day, we didn't return at all. And so what I was left with is 150 vases, and they didn't finish their stories. And so my attempt to create this installation as an altar was to continue that story for them as a way for them to record this moment in time with the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement within our histories. The purpose of the totem pole is a lot of Native communities use it, especially in the Pacific Northwest, as a way to honor. And you can see some of the totems are plain white, no surface treatments. Then others are marked with these black ink marks, right? Some of them have more of an age look, but that was just more of my artistic interpretation of what was happening during the pandemic. Some days were darker than others. So what I want to do with the pots is each pot is an individual pot that one student created. So what I did is I created them into more of a statue, into a totem, so they all can connect their stories together. And then at the bottom of the installation, these are all the people that we lost during the pandemic and also through Black Lives Matter movement. And so whether it be personal, family, friends, to people that we saw in the news that we maybe never have met, but these are people that we want to honor as a community as well. I think this is a very pivotal point for a lot of communities to let their voices be heard. I just recently did a trip from New York to California to help my cousin move back. And in each major state, everybody's voice was amplified when what you saw on the streets, what you see, the injustices happening throughout the nation. And you see these in murals, you see this in public artwork, you see this in toppling of monuments. And people are wanting to speak out, and they're using arts as a weapon and also as a tool to educate others about what's going on in our communities, whether it be local or national. A lot of my students have gone away to universities, but they're really excited that they're able to present their work in a community space, such as Self-Help Graphics, in Los Angeles. So here we have a lot of Santa Ana kids who probably have not even stepped foot in LA or yet alone Self-Help Graphics, but they're exhibiting here. So it's a milestone for them. It's something that's really important, that their voice does count and that it matters, and that we want to respect that they are able to create and yet tell that story. I think our hope is like that they are the voice of what's going to happen in the future, right? We're wanting to be able to give them the tools as educators, as like, you know, maybe you might not be great at this or at that, but here's a different tool that you can probably use to amplify your voice. This is a tool that you can use to help you heal, to help you to manifest what your dreams are. It's not all about just trauma and remembrance, but it's also as a way to look into the future, look as a thing of hope as well for our students. And so I'm just hoping that by them documenting these stories within their vases and using their hands, they're able to use that as a tool. My main philosophy as an educator is that you connect three things. You connect your head, you connect your heart and your hands, and that with those three things connected, you're able to create magic. That's it on my behalf. That's my journey.
We're so lucky that we get to have you as a teacher in our district, that you touch the lives of our students and by extension, our community and our families. What a gift that you bring. All the many things that you do. That's just the tip of the iceberg. So
I know
it's been really fun.
I know. Sorry, I felt a little bit fragmented, but I mean,
no, it's been really fun to get to know you and your journey and the man behind the curtain, if you will. So thank you for taking this time to tell your story and tell the story of our students. And we look forward to you continuing to tell the story of our students. And you can catch that video about the self-help graphics on our SAUSD Arts YouTube channel, which you may find this eventually there too. So, but thank you so much. We're excited and appreciate all that you do. And it's been a lovely journey in this Boca de Oro festival. So thanks, Rigo.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sabrina.